My story goes back to the summer of 1962. My aunt, Mary McGrory, was covering the White House at the time for the Washington Star and later for the Washington Post. She invited my sister and me, my sister Ann, to visit Washington, to see the town and to get a flavor of what the government was like. And on one of the last days that we were there, Mary was pretty busy at work, so she asked one of her friends to take us around. So when we got there, Mary was a little bit late, so we sat in the White House in the press room with Pierre Salinger. Pierre was really friendly, great guy, and he went away for a few minutes and came back and said to me and Ann, "Would you like to meet the president?" And we said, absolutely, we'd love to. He took us over to the Oval Office, tapped on the door, and JFK opened it. He brought us in. He talked to us for a good 10 or 15 minutes. He was from Boston, we were from Boston, and he wanted to hear how the town was doing without him. And we talked for quite a while. He wanted to know how school was and all the things that most grown-ups will ask little kids. I was 12 at the time, and Ann was 10. The greatest part was that he gave us both one of the presidential pens. The thing that struck me the most was his presence. He was very tall, and you could tell that he was actually interested in what we had to say. And he made us feel right at home. It was not quite apparent to us that he was the most powerful man on the planet, but to us, he was a pretty cool guy.
When I was in 8th grade and 9th grade, two girlfriends and I decided that the pages in the Senate were really cute. And so we started spending all our money, our babysitting money, on bus fare into D.C. to the Senate. And we were fortunate that the guards got to know us before the tourist season really started, and the guards would always let us go and sit upstairs in the press gallery, which faces the Senate. One time, Carolyn and Pam and I went up there, and the guards came to us and said, "Our boss is here today. You're going to have to stand in line with the tourists." And, you know, we were just too cool for school, you know, having to stand with all those tourists. And so I was leaning out on the red velvet rope that kept us from traveling out of line. I was leaning way out, just sort of bored with having to be in this situation. Kennedy was coming out of the antechamber of the Senate, and he was very recognizable by then. And so he was facing away from all of the people in line so as to be able to get through there without being recognized. So he was talking to his aides like this, walking forward. And of course, I was leaning out. He ran right into me and knocked me to the floor, which I thought was pretty cool. And so he turned around and very graciously helped me up with his hand and then escaped.
Stan McLean, working here in McLean's barber shop. My dad started in 1920. And this particular Friday night, Jack Kennedy came in, got a haircut, and he was headed for the West Coast. That night he flew out to the West Coast, and he was nominated for the presidency, and he came back from the West Coast to Hyannis, and he never came in as president. When Jack came in, that president came in, I have respect for him. At that time, I call him Jack because that's, you asked the question, but I mean, we didn't know him by Jack. You knew him at his come in, and you knew who he was and that, but conversation wasn't much. Like any other customers, as long as you paid, I said goodbye and have a good night, you know. But he paid, and they went off, and he did this thing. It was a wonderful experience for us, and I think the country has never been the best or served as well as it has been since the Kennedy era.
During the 50s, we used to go skating down Aunt Bet's, because it don't look like it is now, but it was a nice pond. The fire department would come down on Wednesday night, it was a drill night, and they cut a hole in the ice and they pump water out of it and put water all over the ice, make it nice and smooth. Anyway, Thanksgiving, the Kennedys were all around, and they'd go down there skating. It was always bumping them there. When they built the skating rink, I was sitting on the benches there, and Jackie Kennedy was sitting right next to me, and JFK was sitting next to her. And he said at the time, he said something to me, I hear they're going to want to put a roof on this. What do you think about that? I said, that's what I hear, but I think if it does, the hockey will take over. There'll be no more public skating. He says, I think you're right, because this place was supposed to be like Rockefeller Center is, open air. But anyway, so he says, well, they're going to do what they want to do, I guess, anyway. So he was talking to people, and Jackie was very nice. I mean, she was talking to us. They were just regular people like anybody else until he got to be president. Then he had to be careful because everybody's around. But even when he was president, we see him at church, and after church he'd come out and shake hands with everybody and talk to people.
I was a brand new second lieutenant in the Mass National Guard stationed at the Commonwealth Armory over in Brighton. And one night I was in there with a whole group of NCOs. The President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was speaking that night in what was called the Big Ring. About 7:30 or so, two fellows walked in with the squiggly things on their ears and asked if there was a private men's room. And I said, well, I have an officer's latrine. There's a one-hole latrine right here. They said, thank you very much, and they're gone. And about 10 minutes later, who walks in but the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Handsome-looking guy. He comes over, shakes hands with me, the first sergeant, the other NCOs, and everyone is stunned. And he tells an anecdote or something, and he goes in and uses that we called it the latrine. And in a few minutes, he comes out and shakes hands again and left. Well, what happened then was the first sergeant quickly assigned a couple of fellows to go in and take the seat off the John. And in the NCO club, they hung it up on the wall. And before the end of the night, up on top of the entrance to the latrine was John's John. And we had a good laugh about that for years afterwards. It was one of those events that you never, ever could plan. And it was so serendipitous. And it just brought us together that night.
Back in 1960, I had an encounter with John Kennedy while he was campaigning. I was a student at Northeastern University, and I was on my co-op job. I was actually on an errand in Boston, and I was walking by the Park Square Hotel on the sidewalk, and there was a lot of commotion in front of me. And therefore, I couldn't walk on the sidewalk anymore, and I had to go out into the street. As I was going out into the street, there were several limos double parked there. As I was going by one limo, Jack Kennedy came out of the hotel with his entourage, quickly got into the limo that was double parked. As I was walking by the limo, the rear window was rolled down, and lo and behold, Jack Kennedy was in the back seat. He made eye contact with me. He stuck his hand out the window and shook my hand. And I was going, wow. I'm 76 years old. This happened 57 years ago. And it's like one of those things that happened yesterday to me. I can remember everything about it, even though the encounter probably lasted, no more than 5 or 6 minutes from beginning to end. But as I tell my grandchildren now, and a lot of younger people, that I shook John Kennedy's hand, they go, wow, what a big deal, because he's such a legend, and he wasn't at that particular time to a lot of people outside of New England, but he was to me.